We're live from Huntsville, Alabama.
The Inglorious Pastords, Season 9, Episode 8. Going to be one of our top episodes.
Oh, I have a really
Raj.
good feeling about this one. Yeah.
I do too.
Considering the explosive laughter we had just moments ago.
Well, that's the things that we find funny, I'm not sure our listeners necessarily would find funny.
Offensive could be one word that people would.
That's a word. That,
troubling, repulsive,
gross. Get away from me and don't ever come back. That kind of thing. Yes. Hey, so what did you do your talk on this morning? I was just curious. I didn't get to listen to it. I was listening to We the Kingdom. I needed music, not Roger, this morning.
No, that's a lot of people. You'd be surprised how many people tell me that. I need music, not Raj today.
Sorry, let's see. It's Roger or music. Music.
That's not a tough decision. That's among the easiest of decisions is music over Raj.
Well, of course, it depends on the music too, I guess, at that point.
Yes, but almost any music you're going to like.
I would take Roger over polka.
A Gregorian chant.
Gregorian chants could be fun. That could be
yodeling.
Nice. Oh, yodel. Yeah, definitely Roger over a yodel.
Or operatic. Hey, I did see an interesting factoid. Came across that you might find interesting. Now, again, it's NFL related, but
oh, good. I haven't even watched the draft. I don't even know who his number one pick was.
Yeah, I don't remember either.
Interesting,
because it wasn't like a QB or something. It was, yeah.
Did someone slap somebody? No one even remembers who was in the draft.
No, I saw. So, I think it was since Bill Belichick became the coach of the Patriots.
Yeah.
Like 20, not 25, but a little over 20, close to 25 years ago. Anyway, I saw a stat on how many teams have a winning record against Belichick over that span.
Okay.
So how many teams do you think have a winning record against Bill Belichick since he became the coach of the New England Patriots?
There's 32 teams, right?
Correct.
I'm guessing 2.
Now, here's where you're warm but wrong.
We're going to play that game.
The warm but wrong award.
3.
No. So,
getting colder.
No teams have a winning record, but 2 teams have a 500 record.
No team has a winning record against Bill Belichick?
Right. No, none of the other 31 teams.
That's ridiculous.
Have a winning record, but 2 teams have a.
Broncos have got to be one.
They are. And they're the most fascinating because I've forgotten the other one because they were like 3-3. What's fascinating with the Broncos is they're 10-10 against.
They've played a lot.
So
AFC championships, playoff games.
They've played a lot of games.
Some not in the same conference.
Classic,
I mean, we're in the same conference, right. Not the same division or anything.
So anyway, I just thought that
is interesting.
So if we were, I don't know, look whether we play you this year, but if we play you this year.
It seems like it's about time.
Yeah.
I mean, in the.
And by the way, I'm not even sure Belichick's going to have a winning record this year. The AFC is ridiculous. I listened to. You're not
ridiculous.
I listened to someone give their top 5 teams in the AFC. A few days ago.
Is this the same top 5 for the NFL?
No, this is for the top 5 teams in the AFC. Well, and 3 of them were in your division.
Yeah.
And on this person's list, comically, Denver wasn't one
because it's an unknown.
But so is Las Vegas. So, in other words, so just your division. There's talk about your division. It's possible now, with the 7 teams that you have 4 wild cards, that in the 3 wild cards, you could have one entire division. if there ever was a chance that
That's interesting.
an entire division could make the playoffs, it's your division.
Yeah, they've moved things around so much. So obviously Kansas City. It's not the Chargers anymore, or is it Chargers?
Yeah.
Okay, but they're out of a different city. Los Angeles Chargers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Las Vegas Raiders.
They put the Raiders in the top 5.
Yeah,
that surprises me.
No, and I think that's.
I mean, I think
that's a hot take.
Right, would be a
no. I would
pick
I
with
would say
Russell
exactly. Anyway, but then you look at where those teams, the players they got in the offseason, and you still have the Baltimore and the
right.
And yeah, it's just Buffalo. It's just an extremely good conference.
Should be fun to watch.
Should be fun to watch.
Should we see that? It should be fun to watch.
Yes.
So, did you hear there was a leak out of the Supreme Court this week?
I did see a couple of headlines, and I've really not looked at it much beyond that.
And I read a couple of the headlines, but anyway, my first thought was, if there is an overturn of Roe v. Wade, or a significant overturn of that, I thought immediately that followers of Jesus Christ have a tremendous opportunity.
Okay.
In terms of if many states will, across the board, ban abortions, Alabama, I would imagine, would be one of them, because we have right now the toughest abortion laws in the country.
Okay.
I think it creates a tremendous opportunity for creating options for these moms, in taking care of them and providing support for them and creating a space for them to have baby. Marlene and I were obviously very pro-adoption. We've gone through that process 3 times, but it just reminds me, this is a great time for the church to step up and say, hey, if abortion is being removed, let's boots on the ground, jump in there and provide help to these moms that many at this point feel like they don't have a choice. And I've talked to some of those moms in the past.
Sure. No, and gosh, how do I say it? Because it's going to sound jaded. Maybe I don't have a lot of confidence in the church doing that. I think our more recent history.
Okay.
Well, I guess what I'm speaking to is actually just part of my heart that's so heavy for. There's some parts of the heart of God, it seems we've missed and aren't terribly concerned about. I mean, even the indictment that Jesus had for his own people, somehow in your love of and protecting the law, you lost mercy.
Yeah.
You lost sight of people. And so wanting the right laws about abortion and murder, but what about where does hate come in, and where does lack of mercy, where does judgment over mercy? And I just still see such a strong lean into judgment and almost where when people again have made certain kinds of choices, then we're not called to help them. It's almost that we've made a biblical out of you made your bed, you lie in it, which is categorically against the heart of God. But just where we see okay, this thing about mercy and this about compassion and offering and accepting and welcoming people and having conversations with them and embracing them and expressing love to them. Well, that's off limits, if they're transgender. That's off limits if they're homosexual. That's off limit if they're support, gay rights. That's off limits if they got pregnant out of wedlock. That's off limits if
or got pregnant late in life and don't feel like they're in a position to provide for a child.
What fill in the blank?
Yep.
It just feels like that mercy or even where it, and again, even this other thing that's just, I'm just saying, that raises the cynicism. This thing that this just pervasive emphasis on personal responsibility of individual, pardon me, responsibility, to where that person's responsible for his or her behavior. But if they've made a choice, I don't have a responsibility. We don't have collective responsibility. There's not a responsibility for the church to reach out to moms in crisis, crisis pregnancies. That there's no, we're only responsible. Make sure the laws are right. Okay. And I can just see if something happens to Roe v. Wade, this is what God wanted. He wanted the law changed. We got the law changed. God's smiling. He's clapping. The church has done its work. I voted for the right people. I did this kind of thing. And there's nothing more for us to do. I'm just saying, based on messages I see and posts I see from people in the church, I'm not super confident that there's going to be suddenly this groundswell of merciful compassion to people that now we're going to, because all we need to do, all God was looking for us to do is change the freaking law. And that's all that matters. So I almost feel, I'm hopeful, but not optimistic.
I think you are understandably jaded, and thanks for sharing that. I think I struck a bit of a nerve. That was good. But I will say I am probably more hopeful than you are, because I do, and it's even part of what I've been thinking more on the whole thing of undivided, and what do we agree on, and because there's plenty of things we disagree on. I was reading Jesus this morning, and he was even talking about if the salt loses its saltiness, we're the salt of the earth. And I looked at multiple passages where he says this salt thing. I'm trying to understand this. It's an interesting analogy. It's neither good for the soil or the manure pile. It's just kind of thrown out. But he said, and everyone will be salted with fire. The above verse is talking about temptation and sin, interestingly enough. But then he says, have salt in one another and have salt in yourselves and be at peace with one another, which is interesting. So I'm more hopeful, because I think it's something that followers of Jesus Christ can rally around and say, how do we do more education on pregnancy prevention? How do we provide more support for a mom that's choosing to have this child? How do we create support networks for a mom? Because I know from personal experience how hard it is to give up your child if you carry it to full term.
Gosh, yes.
Okay. I think it's a different emotional thing if a mom chooses to terminate that pregnancy before it's out of the womb. But it's a tough thing. The longer you go in that pregnancy, I've watched it in terms of how they feel about that baby. So I think, I don't know. I'm just excited about the opportunity. And my prayer is that the church will step up and say, because when I look at scripture and I look at Jesus, widows and orphans, widows and orphans, widows and orphans, in our culture, I think we're going to have more children and moms that are going to qualify for that kind of care that Jesus calls for. And Old Testament and New Testament, it's not just one or the other. Even what you talked about, was it yesterday? That was really good. But, don't be fooled by God's disguises. The responsibility, the opportunity we have as a church to help people in need, Matthew 25, because when we do, we're helping Jesus. And that's what turns the corner. When we no longer look at that maybe that single mom with judgment who has a child out of wedlock or unplanned pregnancy or whatever we want to call it, and we see them as a person who made a bad choice, Jesus says, I want you to see them as me.
Yes.
And when you help them,
right,
you're helping me.
Yeah.
And that's the corner that I'm praying that we will turn.
Yeah, I agree. The opportunity is there. I think what's hard for me is the opportunity has been there for a long time. In other words, forget the freaking law. I mean, I'm just talking.
Roger, in one sense, the fact that abortion was the law for now is the law of the land, potentially was the law of the land. It might have given Christians an out for being supportive.
The bottom line is mercy always wins out over law. And even the idea that we were,
Jesus, yes.
um, just looking to change the law without actually believing that we could shift or change things by mercy and compassion and serving and caring. The idea that that the singular challenge we have, and by the way, even for people who are pro-choice, most of them are not cheering, okay, abortion's a wonderful thing, this is great, we need to have more of it. Most would say, okay, yeah, none of us are wanting to have widespread and just we want to support a woman's. The reality is we could have been now I see pockets.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying the idea that something will change that hasn't been there over the last 5 years because we have an opportunity. Well, we had the opportunity before. So, but I will say, yes, the opportunity is there. The call of Jesus to minister to me, the words of Jesus powerfully ring, oh, yeah, it was me. And so, the other thing that comes to my mind as we're talking about this in terms of opportunity, this thing has just been pressing in my heart for the church.
Yep.
Again, I would just say this is another area where I don't think it's been the church being the light of the world in the best possible way. But the care, what you're talking about, the least of these, and Jesus talking about, when I was hungry, you gave me something to eat.
Yep.
When I needed clothes, you gave me. And again, we're just not talking about this is the poor. This is the needy, the people in crisis, the people who can't pay the bills, the people who.
I wonder even, if there was I don't even know if there was a debtor's prison kind of thing. There was a debtor's prison because Jesus
That was a
referenced
concept,
that
yes.
in parables.
Yes.
That if you can't pay this back, we're going to turn you over to the jailer and all of that. And Jesus said, visit people in prison. You're visiting me, and there's a temptation for me to think, well, what series of decisions put them in prison? And then I have to think, well, what series of decisions have I made that I have not experienced the same consequence for,
Yep.
but certainly could have.
Right. And what even as the Bible reference, even kinds of crimes are generated by desperate poverty, where the Solomon or the writer of Proverbs even talking
Yep.
about, God, please don't let me become poor, rich or poor. I don't want to be rich and forget you. Then I don't want to become poor and steal, because that's when you're desperately poor.
Yes.
And you're there's I've got to eat somehow. I mean, I've got to.
Right.
What do you do? But the emerging opportunity that's been pressing on my heart is this, and I don't even know how to. So, a leader of a country, Putin, decides a few months back he's going to make a decision that's going to cost hundreds of thousands of people their lives. His people, Ukrainians. But here's what you watch, and this is how his decision has affected the world economy. Oh, we're looking at, okay, I'm paying higher gas prices, food prices are higher for me. It's an inconvenience.
Right.
But oh my goodness, the other opportunity is this is the time for us to look around those of us who are experiencing the inconvenience of higher prices, the inconvenience of food that costs more, the inconvenience of gas that costs more. We could think in our own country of the people who now that's forcing food decisions. That's forcing what bills I pay. That's forcing and rent skyrocketing. Will I be able to stay in a home? And then outside of but outside of our country, even now, this whole thing going on, if now Putin decides to restrict their goods coming out, okay, they've been sanctioned, but there's this talk he's sanctioned. Well, they're one of the primary provider worldwide of wheat. So you talk about now we're on the edge of famine. We're on the edge of food scarcity in places that can't, where it's already scarce. So here's this moment where we have an opportunity now to see Jesus. There's just right now all around us, there's opportunities to feed Jesus, to clothe Jesus in this moment, to focus on the desperate need that is emerging in our own country, but worldwide.
Yeah, and I appreciate the fact that you use the term inconvenience, because for those of us in the middle class and above, it's an inconvenience.
Right.
It's not going to keep our children from being fed. It's not going to keep us from going where we need to go. It's not going to keep us from having a house or a roof over our head.
Will I lose my home?
Right.
Yeah.
But for many, that's exactly what they're facing.
No, it's just, I think this was the thought that I had recently, and I think I did share it. I know I shared it in a video, but it's what I feel the pull of is when unexpected costs or bills come to me. I just recently started getting the flood of medical bills from my amnesia incident 2 months ago. And there's some pretty high numbers in there that I wasn't expecting. And now I drive a diesel vehicle, and that's cost of gas is like $5 a gallon and more. And then I've got the food, these kind of things. And I realize, and I think God just kind of pinged me in a way that I think he wants to ping all of us followers. This is when we are starting to feel the crunch, unexpected bills, higher prices, the temptation is to get my focus narrowed. I can feel it. I've got to take care of this. Yeah. These bills are coming in. And I think the call of Jesus when I'm facing crisis is keep looking out, keep looking at people whose your crises matter, Raj. It's not God saying they don't. But don't let that. This is the time where we are tempted. This is where I can't afford to give.
Yeah.
Or I can't afford to be generous in this season. I've got to sock away, or I've got to take care of this. I've got to, and I think this is where we have the opportunity to really trust God, to really trust him to take care of our daily bread. And I'm going to keep being generous. I'm going to look for people for whom this crisis is not an inconvenience.
Right.
It is a game changer.
It's a livelihood issue.
It's a livelihood issue.
Not a lifestyle issue.
Yes.
A livelihood issue.
Right.
Because I realize a lot of the stuff we're talking about, middle class and above, it's a lifestyle issue. Yeah. I might have to cut back here. I might have to curb this or that. But for many, it's a livelihood issue.
Yeah.
And that's what I was even thinking about when you talk about the Putin decision. I'm like, it wasn't just lives lost, it was livelihoods lost. So the millions of people that are now in poverty in another country, living off the good graces of others who are being Christ to them. It was interesting. There was an article in the Times that talked about of the it was almost 5 million at the time when they wrote this that have been displaced.
Oh, it's a staggering number. Yes.
90% are women, because men ages 18 through 60, Ukraine says they have to stay because of the need for military and people to bear arms. So 90% is women and children. And you think about the vulnerability of, it's back to the widows and the orphans, a woman and a child in another country, hoping for the best. It even reminds me a little bit of Naomi's story. Naomi has to leave her homeland. Yeah. And now it's just she loses her,
and then her husband
dies, and then both her sons die. So it's her and her daughters in a culture that they have very
men
little.
Were the breadwinners.
Men were the breadwinners. They were largely property. All that to say, there's opportunities all around us. And I realize for me, when I look at the world, and I think this is the way some people are seeing it, and I understand it, it can be overwhelming.
Yes.
The sheer volume of need that we know about now. In other words, it's one thing 2,000 years ago, you would see a person in need at your gate.
In your village.
Or in your village.
Yep.
Now we know about poverty and persecution and displacement and lives lost and livelihoods lost globally.
Yeah.
And it can be, for me, it can become overwhelming. It's just like, where do you even start? And Jesus reminded me again this morning, if you offer even a cup of cold water to one of these little ones in my name, you will certainly not. One small act of kindness, of compassion, of mercy, of generosity, it changes the world. It's that whole thing of one life matters so much, one person's life. And so if for everyone that listening, don't feel like you have to take on the global problem of poverty, but you can help one person that might have tremendous need in a season of opportunity. And we've always had opportunity. It just, it feels more heightened to me in a lot of ways. And that might just because we have so much access to so much information.
Right. But it also, that access to information is also tandem to, we also have access to networks. Then, and by the way, I felt the exact same thing. In fact, my prayer the last couple of days, just very, very specific. God, there's so much need. There are so many people hungry. There's so many people without clothes. There's so many people in prison. There's so many people planning funerals. There's so many people. What would you have me to do? And I think where we can look both locally, because I can look at what's one family or one person whose livelihood is affected. Okay, what could I do there? But I also, because of the networks, there are the Food for the Hungries and the World Visions and the people who, because of their love of Jesus, provide a network. Now, my $200 may not feel like, it may feel like it's not doing, again, it's the wrong thing to look. The $200 I send, or whatever that number is going to Jesus. It's going to, under the hand of a reputable or trustworthy organization, it's going to provide that clothing or that food or that medication or that access to jobs or whatever. So it's trusting then God to lead. What does it look like? I think my bigger call is not, my thought is not, oh, we've got to take all of this on. My biggest call is what God spoke to me. When my needs start increasing, my focus just tends to narrow. And it's actually probably easier when all the need of the world is overwhelming as well, because I don't even know where to start.
Right.
So then I can just find myself. I think this is what God was speaking is, okay, Raj, you got these medical bills that you weren't expecting. Prices have gone up in ways that you weren't expecting. Your utility bill, something went crazy with that this week, and it was this month, and it was like crazy high. And it's like, I can feel the circle the wagons. I can feel the, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to start watching my dollars more. Oh, things could be happening. What could the economy could do this? I can feel the pull. I need a stockpile. I can feel the pull. How can I preemptively, what if this happens, or what if this happens, or what if that happens? And I think that Jesus is saying, you can trust me with that. So the stuff you want to pull close and stockpile, why don't you just give that? Why don't you just have a giving mentality in this season?
Oh, love that. I realize it's so funny. We think about interestingly similar things at different seasons.
It is weird. Yes.
I've never, and this is just because of my temperament more than anything. It's not a spiritual thing.
Right.
I've never had any temptation to stockpile.
Right.
Whatever happened, because we were Marlene talking about something about apocalyptic happened, just access to clean water. I'm like, well, I've got like 14 water filters in the garage. I think we're okay on water. As long as we can find a pond or a puddle somewhere, we're gonna make it on water. But I've never been a stockpiler, and I've often thought, but I am a fleer. In other words, Jesus talked about when persecution comes to the city, flee to the mountains. I'm like,
you've talked honestly
I'm
about
all
that.
about that. I can live in the mountains for a long, long time. The problem is, I might develop what I would call a reclusive mentality, which is I'm taking my family to the mountains.
Yep.
Sorry about your family.
Sucks to be you.
Sucks to be you. Exactly right. And like, nope. We have to be we have to think community. In other words, a crisis creates an opportunity for community. So others couldn't live in the mountains, perhaps as well.
Because they don't own a place in the mountains.
Well, that's true.
As you almost do.
Well, when I say flee the mountains, I'm not even talking about the farm. I'm talking about like going deep into the Appalachians or the Sierras.
Okay.
You know,
right.
Marlene and I watched a movie the other day. This is how it ends. It was just an interesting. I don't know if you've seen it. It's on Netflix or something.
I don't know that.
This is how it ends. It's a new one coming. It's coming out. It's just a fascinating apocalyptic sort of. And I realize our world is fascinated by when's it going to happen? What's it going to look like? We think nuclear holocaust. I've seen multiple shows that talk about mutually assured destruction now.
Which people are talking,
which is coming up a lot right now.
It's coming up an awful lot.
Russia presses the button, U.S. presses the button.
World War III, and then the buttons get pressed, and it's like.
But I realize folks in the first century were also consumed with apocalyptic ends to the world.
Yeah.
You know, Peter even talked about one of these days, and I think he's speaking by the Spirit, but doesn't know what that's going to look like. This world's going to be consumed by fire. I'm thinking, I can see how that could happen now, where the entire thing could be consumed by fire.
The apocalyptic images in Revelation don't seem as bizarre.
You're exactly right. They don't seem as bizarre now as they did maybe even 50 years ago. Although I know even through the Cold War, there was a lot of that talk of nuclear holocaust and the Cuban Missile Crisis, all that kind of stuff. All that to say, I found myself last night as I went to bed praying, longing for the new order. And I think it's good. I don't think it flows from cynicism. I was telling the Lord, I'm a little tired, weary of the world mess. The Russia-Ukraine, but that's been going on for 2,000 years. Jesus said, in the end times, which you live in, there's going to be wars and rumors of war. Nations will rise against nations. There's going to be poverty and pestilence and famine, earthquakes. I'm like, we've been seeing that for a
Cheers.
We've been seeing that for a long time. But then he would say, but don't be alarmed. In this world, you will have trouble, but in me, you can have peace. And so I was praying again for that peace, but I was also praying an honest prayer of longing for the new order. Jesus says, one of these days, there's going to be no more crying. There's going to be no more weeping. There's going to be no more death or disease, for the old order of things has passed away. And I'm like, I want the new order.
But aren't you living in, this is the tension we're called to live in. And I hear it.
I'm tired of tension.
But it's in the words of the Apostle Paul, right? When he says, oh, I'd love to go home.
Yeah.
I'd love to go home and be with.
But if I stay,
but I have a calling right now. And this is what I hear. I think the tension we're called longing. We don't want to turn longing for home, longing for the restoration to move us to isolation, to move us to retreat. It's longing for that, but serving and loving people. And that's what Paul was talking about. But he said, actually, for me to go on home, be far better for me.
Oh, yeah.
But I want to think about you. And it's that tension of, it's okay to long for home. It's okay to long for the redemption of the creation.
And Roger, by the way, the death and homegoing he was talking about was very likely an axe to the neck.
Yes.
I mean, in other words, he's going to be executed, and he's still like, that's far better, to go on home. But I love this. The reality is, and I tell it to people all the time. I have to tell myself, as long as I'm breathing, as long as you're breathing, God has work for us to do.
Right.
So don't let the salt lose its saltiness. Don't let the light go out. Don't hide it under I almost said bushel, but no one knows what that is. Don't hide it under a clay pot that you can't see through. Man, let's shine brightly.
Yeah, I think the pull, and this is where, if you look at the subtle work of the enemy, he's always going to be working against that. It's going to be some form of.
He's always going to be working toward futility. Right. Yes, it's futile.
Yeah, not going to make a difference. save yourself. It's not doing anything anyway.
And to do nothing, I'm going to say this wrong because I haven't thought about it. Satan wins in that sense.
Right.
Just to do nothing.
Right.
Evil, to do nothing, evil triumphs.
Right. Even to hide your gift, if we're using the analogy of the parable of Jesus.
Yeah.
Don't just, and here's the thing. He's going to put out some really good sounding reason. It's gonna make sense. It's gonna be spiritual.
Yeah. Talk about that.
Well, I mean,
that's a great
in other words,
point. The angel of light,
right,
masquerading as an angel of light. There's a good reason for you not to use that gift. You might lose it, so wrap it in precious cloth and put it on a shelf so that you know. Well, that it's
even if I come back to our earlier part of a conversation, I think one example of that is, well, that person screwed up. You're not obligated to follow this part of the way of Jesus if that person was an idiot, if that person was immoral, if that person knowingly violated the heart of God. You don't. To me, that's the whisper of, you've got no responsibility. Just pack. You don't have to serve them. You don't have to extend mercy to them.
Well, and
it can even sound like because they chose the unrighteous path. I don't want to now step in and affirm that. I don't want to bless them as if, and so it has this little tiny sound of righteousness, but of course it's terribly broken.
And of course, we don't know all the rationalizations that were made in the story of Jesus and the Good Samaritan. I mean, there's so much brilliance to his parables, but this thing of seeing the person in desperate need, in absolute crisis, and then going to the other side of the road. The idea being it's unclean. I can't touch that. I wonder what he did to get, because many in their world, as in our world, if something really bad happens to you, you must have done something wrong.
Yep. Or could this put me at risk? I mean, certainly people have brought up, okay, if someone attacked that person, is this a setup? Do I go to help them? So look out for yourself. Well, of course, God wants you to look out. Of course, even in our day, of course, God wants you to look out for yourself. That's so we understand that you're not going. You wouldn't want to put your life at risk.
That's a good point. In the movie, spoiler alert. In the movie, the end of all this is how it ends. There's no law in the land. They're driving across country, and gas, of course, is this commodity that everyone's trying to get a hold of. And at one point, there's a woman on the road asking for help, and that one guy's going, "Don't stop, don't stop, don't stop." The other guy stops and gets out. Well, as soon as he gets out to help her, two good with guns come from the other side. It was a setup. They were using a perceived crisis. All that to say, yeah, that's real. Oh. Here's the thing. We're going to get taken advantage of. If we choose mercy and we choose kindness and we choose compassion and we choose to care for other people, we're going to be taken advantage of. We're going to be hurt.
There are going to be losses.
There's going to be losses. We're going to be disappointed. But Jesus says, but your reward in heaven, your reward in the new order is great.
Right.
And that's what we have to live for.
Right.
Maybe that's what I needed to hear this morning. I'm not living for the here and now, because the here and now can be pretty depressing on certain fronts.
Right. But it's also, I would also say, it's the here and now, but it's the by and by, but it's also the here and now, because what Jesus is actually saying, there's this grace in putting your life at risk. There's this grace in sacrifice. I'm going to give you an example.
Yep.
So it's just fascinating. So 2 Corinthians chapter 8, Paul starts off this. He says, I want to tell you about this grace God gave the Macedonian churches. And this gets me really excited. So I'm looking and say, what's this grace? What's this blessing? What's this check in the mail? What's this grace God gave the Macedonian churches?
Yeah. It's a special gift.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, he gave this. You're not going to believe it. So Paul's talking about it. He said,
everyone's leaning in.
Everyone's leaning in. He said, they're out of their exceeding joy and their excessive poverty, they wanted to give generously. Here's what happened. The Macedonian churches, which were very poor, very, very poor people, they heard about people in desperate need. Yeah. They heard about, and again, this could well have been believers who were lost family members to death, and now they're destitute, lost homes, lost jobs, whatever. So they have almost nothing. And it says, Paul says, get this. This was the grace. they pleaded with us, oh, we want to give. So these people who were facing desperate, he said the mix of their joy and their desperate poverty welled up into rich generosity. And then he says this, he says, see that you excel in this grace of giving. Now, what's fascinating to me there is he says they understood this as a grace. Jesus was right when he said it's better to give than to receive. And here's the thing, in this season, it feels like look out for myself is going to bring me joy. That's going to be the grace I need. And Jesus keeps saying, watch, that trusting me actually is where you want to keep looking out for yourself, especially like if you're deeply poor, or that's where you really want to watch out for yourself. That's where you really, and no, they didn't want to miss out.
And it's interesting because I was just looking at statistics, which have changed over time. But I remember doing a talk on giving and realizing that I was in the top 1% of world wealth.
Yeah.
When you look at, and I'm like, that's just ridiculous because we don't think of ourselves necessarily as rich, but
right.
Reality is we are.
Yeah.
But at that time, and I'll have to look it up again, maybe I'll do that on another podcast. But at that time, the poor gave slightly more than double what a person in the middle class or wealthy gave in terms of charitable contributions. Right. Think about it. They're giving twice as much percentage-wise as so I think the number might have been 2.4% was the average American in terms of giving. And the poor were giving almost 5%.
And I will tell you this, beyond that, I can almost guarantee you, because of my experience, outside of this is tracking charitable giving.
Yeah.
But what those same people were doing for people in their neighborhood, in their networks, that
you don't even know about,
that you can't track.
Right. You can't track.
I guarantee you those numbers. I've watched it in my own neighborhood.
Yeah.
But the idea,
it might be quadruple or more. Yeah.
There's something about even wealth and affluence that can even kind of just stiffen your heart. You don't have an empathy because you're not there. But where you have been desperately poor, see the Macedonian churches, they knew what it felt like to be powerless, to be helpless, to be totally dependent on others. And then that along with the heart of Jesus, moved them to, oh goodness, we can't leave other people in that same condition. So we're going to cut back you know what? He said he gave beyond, Paul says they gave beyond
their means,
their ability.
Yeah, their ability.
Meaning they couldn't afford. They gave beyond what they could afford. But they
trusting that God would provide what
and here's the thing, they saw the kingdom of God, not just in the future.
Yeah.
They saw the kingdom of God now. Because that's the thing. Yes, they're eternal rewards, but they're right now. There's just the reward of actually, this is what we were made for. And even right now, the well done of the Father, when as our bills are mounting and as our costs are, where we give out and serve rather than retreat or isolate or run to the hills, where we do, oh, that's where the kingdom is showing up. That's where the joy is. That's where the Father's saying, oh, well done. And that's what's going to bring joy to us. The contentment and thing that we're so desperately longing for in our wealthy America.
Oh, yeah.
We still think it's going to be accumulation or isolation or pull. No, it's still, Jesus is still saying,
a man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions.
Right.
I
give freely.
He
give.
said, your Father has been pleased to give you the kingdom.
Right.
So give generously, provide purses for yourself that'll never wear out. Purses being a bank account, think retirement, whatever. Purses that will never wear out.
Oh, that's great. No, you know what your retirement account should be? Giving generously.
Yeah.
Right. Here's your.
That is your retirement.
Right. Here's
account.
It's
your future.
Yeah. Now, your retirement planners, they're not going to tell you about this particular plan.
No, this is a new one. This is the Bruce and Roger.
It's the Jesus plan.
trying to follow Jesus plan, which is provide purses for yourself that will never wear out.
Yeah.
Where Roth and Must don't destroy. We do have a Roth IRA thing going on now. Where moth and rust. That was.
So
Oh gosh.
Beware the moth. Don't pursue the wrath.
Don't pursue that. That's good. That's probably our best finish yet.
No, it's not.
It is. It's really good.
Don't,
Let's do it, Diddy.
Don't be a sloth. Get rid of the
The
wrath. It's vulnerable to the moth.
Like a piece of cloth. There's a lot of auths out there. I didn't realize how many. That's good. We'll see you next week.
All right. Maybe.
Most likely. Lord willing.